as we think about the structure of individual paragraphs, it's important to remember again that someone who will be reading this essay, someone from the admissions committee at a boarding school, or a college, or a graduate school, they've never been to Ukraine. And when you think about individual paragraphs and when you think about providing context, it's very important to be specific and always have this thought in mind that whoever will be reading this essay, they don't want to be confused. They've never been to Ukraine, and they may struggle with really, really basic things that may seem to you obvious, but they'll be quite confusing to someone in the United States. For example, right, when you say 1 meter, right, or like 5 meters, like, oh, I fell into a ditch that was 5 meters deep, and I spent 2 nights calling for help. Right, so that sounds like a beginning of a dramatic story. But 5 meters, that's easy to visualize for us. But in the US, for example, they don't have metric system, right? They have feet and they have yards. So if you're basing your entire essay or a big part of this essay, or if you try to convey the dramaticism of the story through this metric system, 5 meters, right? You may lose the reader's attention, and you may confuse him or her because they just don't know what it looks like. 5 meters. It's essentially the same thing as saying 1 tugrek. Like tugrek is a unit, but how large is tugrek? What is tugrek? Is it is it too tall, too short, too long, too thick, too large, too small? You have no idea. And essentially, that's how it sounds to the reader when you talk about meter system, right? When you talk about kilograms, for example, when you talk about kilometers, when you talk about Ukrainian education system, when you talk about Oblast Olympiad, right? No one knows what Oblast Olympiad is, or Republican Olympiad, or All Ukrainian Olympiad. Right? So it's always important when you think about the structure of individual paragraphs, and when you, within these paragraphs, when you provide context, it's very important to have this perspective and always ask yourself, is this understandable to someone who's non-native to Ukraine? Is this understandable to someone who's in the US and doesn't really know anything about either the metric system or the Ukrainian education system, or anything else that may be very common in Ukraine, in Europe, but it's just very different in the United States. Here's an example. Your essay can say something like, another evening on the bus from the city of Cherkasy, Ukraine, to my village. What's the problem here? The problem is I have no idea what Cherkasy is. I have no idea what a Ukrainian village looks like. The reader here tried to convey the fact that he lives in the village, and so he tried to hint at his background and his upbringing, that he actually comes from a very, very, very small, very poor family, for example, right? But in the U.S., village is not necessarily a place where poor people live, right? Village in the U.S. is usually like a suburb with really nice houses, so that really doesn't convey the point that the author tried to make. So a better way of providing context for this statement would be as follows. I grew up in a small village in Ukraine. For years, my world consisted of 4 streets, 40 dilapidated huts, 1 grocery store, and 5 TV channels available through an antenna on my house's roof. Right, so this sentence has a lot of specifics, but it sets the boundaries and explains what a village is. It says, village, and then says it consists of 4 streets, 40 houses that are kind of falling apart, and TV antenna on my roof. So this is a better way of explaining this, as opposed to saying, I live in a village in Ukraine.